I always knew my wife loved money more than she loved me. I just didn't realize how much, until the day she started planning my funeral while I was still breathing. It started with a mistake on her part, a tiny slip-up that she didn't even notice. I was in my office, sipping coffee and going through emails, when an unfamiliar message popped up on our shared iCloud account. She had always been careless with technology, assuming I never checked. It was a conversation between her and her lover, some pathetic, desperate man who actually thought she loved him. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even surprised. I just sat back in my chair, reading through their exchange, feeling nothing but a cold, calculated sense of satisfaction. Because now, I had confirmation. And confirmation meant control. She was playing the long game. Talking about how soon she'd be free, how just a little longer, and they could be together without sneaking around. That was interesting. I had never considered myself a burden she needed to be free from. But then the conversation took a turn, one sentence, one little detail that changed everything. She told him, after the inheritance, we can start fresh. The inheritance. I let out a slow breath, staring at those words. An inheritance meant someone had to die. And since I wasn't expecting any long-lost uncles to drop dead and leave me millions, that left only one logical conclusion. She was talking about me. Fascinating. Most men in my position would react with rage, heartbreak, despair. Not me. I felt something much sharper, much colder settle inside me, a precise and deadly sense of purpose. She wanted me dead for money? Fine. I'd make sure she got exactly what she deserved. Just not in the way she expected. I deleted the message from my phone but left it untouched in the cloud, ensuring I could access it whenever needed. Evidence was important. A plan was more important. And I was already piecing together something beautiful. I walked out of my office, calm as ever, and found her in the kitchen. She was humming, pouring herself coffee, looking every bit the devoted wife. I smiled at her, kissed her on the cheek, and asked about her day. She had no idea she'd just signed her own downfall with a few careless words. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. The loving husband. The hard-working provider. I even surprised her with a weekend getaway, something she had been nagging about for months. She played along, probably thinking I was oblivious, that she was winning. But I was watching her closely, studying every glance at her phone, every unreadable expression when she thought I wasn't looking. She was waiting. Waiting for me to drop dead and make her rich. I wondered how long she had been planning this. Had she researched poisons? Looked into accidents that wouldn't seem suspicious? Or was she just biding her time, waiting for me to suddenly keel over from natural causes? I almost wanted to laugh. The arrogance. The stupidity. She thought she was in control of the situation, that I was just some blind, trusting fool. She had no idea I was already 5 steps ahead. On the surface, everything remained normal. But behind the scenes, I was working meticulously, carefully, ensuring that when the moment came, she would have nothing left. No money, no lover, no escape. Just the brutal, crushing realization that she had gambled and lost. And the best part? She wouldn't even see it coming. She thought she was playing me. She had no idea she was the one being played. Looking back, my life had all the hallmarks of a well-crafted illusion. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was stable. Predictable. The kind of life most men would consider themselves lucky to have. I woke up at the same time every morning, to the same smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. My wife, Olivia, always made sure there was a fresh cup waiting for me. She knew exactly how I liked it, black, no sugar. We had our morning routine down to an art. She'd sit across from me at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone, while I flipped through emails or the news. It was comfortable, familiar, the kind of effortless partnership that made you believe in words like forever. I had built a good life for us. A beautiful home in an affluent neighborhood. A job that provided more than enough. I never made her want for anything, luxury vacations, designer clothes, jewelry. If she wanted it, she had it. And she always looked grateful, always smiled, always kissed me on the cheek and told me I was a wonderful husband. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Even our fights were forgettable, the kind that barely lasted an evening. If she got irritated over something, me working too late, forgetting an anniversary, I always made up for it. She had a way of pouting, crossing her arms like a spoiled child, but it never lasted long. A well-placed apology, a weekend getaway, and all was forgiven. At least, that's what I thought. Funny, isn't it? How the little things only make sense in hindsight. I remember small moments now, things I brushed off at the time. The way she started putting her phone face down on the table. The way she suddenly became protective of her laptop, shutting it quickly whenever I walked past. The nights she went to bed earlier than usual, claiming exhaustion, but always seemed too alert when I finally joined her. The new lingerie that appeared in her drawer but never made its way into our bedroom. I remember the first time I noticed she wasn't really looking at me anymore. We were having dinner at our favorite restaurant, the same one we'd gone to for years. She used to hang on to my every word, laugh at my stories, reach across the table to squeeze my hand. That night, though, she was distracted. I caught her staring off at nothing, barely registering our conversation. "What's on your mind?" I had asked her. She blinked, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Just thinking about work." Work. That was another thing. Olivia had never been particularly career-driven. She had a job, sure, but it was something she did more for structure than passion. And yet, over the past few months, she had suddenly become busier. Late nights, last-minute meetings, weekends taken up by projects. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But in the back of my mind, something didn't sit right. And yet, I ignored it. Because that's what a good husband does, right? He trusts. He doesn't pry. He doesn't assume the worst. It wasn't just the small changes in her habits. There were bigger things too. Our intimacy, once effortless, became something I had to initiate. And when she did let me touch her, it felt rehearsed, mechanical. The way she kissed me lacked urgency, lacked passion. She was fulfilling a duty, not a desire. And yet, I still pushed those thoughts away. Because we were happy. Because we had everything. Because it didn't make sense for her to throw away the life we had built. And that's the thing about betrayal. It never makes sense until it's staring you in the face, undeniable, cold, and brutal. So I continued on, oblivious, living inside my comfortable lie. I woke up every morning believing I was a man with a loving wife. I went to work believing I was building a future for us. I came home every night believing I was walking into a home filled with love. And she let me believe it. Because to her, it was all part of the game. She wasn't just cheating. She was waiting. For the perfect moment. For the perfect opportunity. For me to become expendable. And that was the cruelest part of it all. I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been targeted. It started with something small. Something insignificant. The kind of thing most husbands wouldn't even notice. But I did. Because I pay attention. Because I don't believe in coincidences. We were having dinner at home. Something simple. Steak, roasted potatoes, a glass of red wine. Olivia had always been particular about meals. She liked them plated a certain way, garnished just right. But that night, she was distracted. Picking at her food, barely eating, checking her phone every few minutes. She thought I didn't see. I did. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She looked up, all wide-eyed innocence. "What do you mean?" I gestured toward her plate. "You haven't touched your food." She glanced down, almost like she hadn't noticed. "Oh, I guess I'm just not that hungry." That was the first lie. Olivia was always hungry. She had a metabolism that burned through meals like a furnace. I used to joke that she could eat an entire pizza and still be asking about dessert. But now, she wasn't eating. She was fidgeting, anxious. I watched as she grabbed her wine glass and took a slow sip, as if buying herself time. Her phone vibrated on the table. Just once. A short, sharp notification. She grabbed it quickly, turned its screen down. That was the second lie. I let the moment hang in the air, watching her, seeing the way she suddenly wouldn't meet my eyes. Then, as if remembering she needed to act normal, she forced a smile. "How was your day?" I almost laughed at the attempt. But I played along. I told her about my day, about a meeting that had run too long, about a client who didn't understand deadlines. She nodded, hummed at the right moments, but she wasn't listening. Her mind was somewhere else. Or rather, with someone else. I could feel it. After dinner, she excused herself early, saying she was exhausted. Another small lie. Olivia never went to bed before me. She liked to curl up on the couch, watch one more episode of whatever show she was into. But not tonight. Tonight, she practically bolted to the bedroom. I waited a few minutes before following. Not out of suspicion. No, not yet. Just curiosity. The door was slightly ajar. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in her hands, typing fast. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. Working late. She jumped. Just a little. Just enough to confirm everything I was already suspecting. She forced a chuckle, locking her phone immediately. Just answering a few emails. Emails. at 10:30 at night, when she had just told me she was too tired to stay up. The third lie. That was when I knew something was off. I didn't call her out on it. Not yet. Instead, I walked over, leaned down, and kissed her on the forehead. She smiled, but there was tension in it, a stiffness that hadn't been there before. When I pulled away, her phone was still in her hand, gripped a little too tightly. She was nervous. Good. That meant she had something to be nervous about. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind turning over every detail. Every small, seemingly innocent lie. One by itself could be brushed off. But 3 in a row? That wasn't a mistake. That was a pattern. And I don't ignore patterns. I don't ignore anything. The next morning, I woke up before her. I made coffee like I always did, went through my normal routine. But now, I was watching. Waiting. Not for another mistake. No, that would be too easy. I wanted to see how long she could keep up the act. How many more lies she could stack before the whole thing collapsed. She walked into the kitchen, stretching, yawning like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't spent last night texting someone in secret. Morning, she said, kissing my cheek. I smiled. Morning. She poured herself coffee, sat down across from me like always. But I could see the difference now. The small hesitations. The way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She had no idea I had already started playing my own game. I didn't need to confront her. Not yet. I just needed to wait. Because sooner or later, she was going to make a real mistake. And when she did, I'd be ready. I don't believe in coincidences. People lie, feelings fade, but patterns, they always tell the truth, and Olivia had started showing me a pattern, a trail of small mistakes leading straight to the truth. The way she started keeping her phone on silent, the way she suddenly needed privacy for everything, the way she changed her passwords without telling me she had never done that before, not once in our entire marriage, and when I casually mentioned that I couldn't access our shared streaming account anymore, she blinked for half a second too long before faking a laugh and saying, "Oh, I must have reset it, let me fix that later," but she never did. I let it slide because I wasn't looking for a confession, I was looking for confirmation, and the more I watched, the more she gave me. One night she told me she was going to dinner with a friend, but something felt off, the tone of her voice, the way she rushed through the excuse like she was rehearsing a script, so I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and watched as she drove away. Then I did something I had never done before. I checked our home security app, the one linked to the GPS in her car. She had no idea I even knew how to use it, and what do you know, she wasn't at the restaurant she said she was going to. She wasn't even in that part of town. She had parked in a residential area 3 miles away. Interesting. I didn't call her, I didn't text her, I didn't do anything. I wanted to see how far she would go, how deep she would dig this hole, and so I waited. 3 hours later, she came home smiling, relaxed, a little too at ease, like she had just enjoyed a perfect evening out with a friend, except she had been nowhere near the place she claimed to be. She kicked off her shoes, flopped onto the couch, and sighed. Long day? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, we talked for hours. She needed to vent about work. It was exhausting. Fourth lie. I sat down next to her, placed my hand on her knee, casual, affectionate grounding. Then I asked her, "What did you guys eat?" She blinked just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough pasta, she said, shrugging with wine. You know, the usual. Fifth lie. I knew exactly where she had been, and it wasn't an Italian restaurant, but I nodded, smiled, played my role perfectly, let her believe I was still the trusting husband, the one who would never suspect, never doubt, never check. But I was done trusting. I started digging every chance I got without making it obvious. Her phone was always locked now, but people are creatures of habit. They use patterns because they make life easier, and Olivia was no exception. I watched her unlock her phone over the next few days, pretending not to care, but memorizing the way her fingers moved, a new code 6 digits long. I replayed the movement in my mind, later ran through the possible number combinations, until one night when she left her phone charging in the bathroom. I tested them, and the third one worked. Just like that, the doors opened. Her messages were clean, wiped daily, nothing suspicious, but people are lazy, and they always forget something. The trash folder, the cloud storage, the banking app. I went through them all methodically, calmly, without guilt, because she had forfeited any right to privacy the moment she decided to lie to me. And there it was: bank transactions, restaurant charges, hotel bookings, Ubers to locations that didn't match any of her stories. Confirmation. But I wasn't done. I needed more, something undeniable, something that would crush any excuse before she even had a chance to make one. So I went deeper. I checked our home Wi-Fi history, every device, every connection. She had no idea that our own internet betrayed her. And there it was: logins to secret social media accounts, messages exchanged over encrypted apps, conversations she thought had disappeared. They hadn't. She had been careful, but not careful enough. She had left a trail breadcrumbs leading right to her lover, and now I had a name, a face, a complete picture of the man who thought he could take what was mine. I sat back staring at the evidence, everything so neatly laid out, a perfect puzzle, except now there was no missing piece, no uncertainty, no doubt. She was cheating. And now I had proof. But proof wasn't enough. Not for me. Because now that I knew the truth, it was my turn to lie, my turn to pretend, to act like nothing had changed, like I was still oblivious, still the fool, still the trusting husband, while I planned something so much worse. She thought she was in control. She had no idea I was already playing the game better than her. I thought I was prepared. I had spent days collecting evidence, turning suspicion into certainty, piecing together every lie she had told me until there was nothing left but the truth. But knowing something and seeing it with your own eyes are two very different things, and when the moment came when the final undeniable proof landed right in front of me, it hit harder than I expected. It was a simple mistake on her part, arrogance really. She had been careful, deleting messages, wiping browser history, changing passwords. But people always slip up when they think they're untouchable, when they believe they've already won. She had left her laptop open in the kitchen, a rare moment of carelessness. A notification popped up, a message preview from him, the man she was risking everything for. A pathetic little note, can't stop thinking about last night, followed by a heart. Last night, the same night she had come home smiling, curling up next to me in bed, the same night she had sighed into my neck, whispered, "I love you," as if I was the only man in her world. I stared at that message for exactly 5 seconds, then I clicked. And there it was, everything. A hidden email account buried under layers of deception, messages stretching back months, plans, stolen moments, excuses for why she had to leave the house, fabricated business trips, romantic words she had once spoken to me now given to another. Photos too. Hotel rooms, dim lighting, sheets tangled around their bodies, her face, the same one that used to light up only for me, now flushed with pleasure for someone else. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't react right away. Emotions flooded in all at once, but not the ones most men would expect. No sadness, no heartbreak, no weakness, just a cold, calculated fury, something sharp and controlled like a blade sliding between ribs. I scrolled through every message, every picture, memorizing details, locking them away in my mind, each one fueling the fire inside me. She had lied so effortlessly, so convincingly, and for what? For this man, this unremarkable, insignificant little parasite who thought he could take what was mine. He had nothing on me, no stability, no future, no strength, and yet she had chosen him over me. Or maybe she hadn't chosen at all. Maybe she thought she could keep us both, string me along until she decided which life was more convenient for her. But she had made a mistake. She had underestimated me. She had thought I would never find out, that I would never be the kind of man who looked deeper, questioned things, set traps. But she was wrong, and now it was too late. I heard footsteps behind me, her light, careless steps, the sound of a woman with no worries, no fear. She hadn't seen me yet, hadn't realized what I was doing, so I clicked out of the emails, closed the laptop, and turned to face her. She smiled, that same soft, affectionate smile she always gave me, like nothing had changed, like she wasn't betraying me with every breath. "Hey you," she said, walking over, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "What are you doing up so early?" I looked at her, really looked at her, this woman I had built a life with, shared a bed with, trusted beyond all reason, and for the first time I saw her for what she really was. A liar. A fraud. A woman who thought she could play me. I smiled back the same way I always did, masking everything behind an expression she wouldn't question. "Just checking emails," I said, voice calm, steady, unreadable. She nodded, completely unaware, completely oblivious, completely mine to destroy. Because now I wasn't just going to leave, I wasn't just going to confront her, no, that would be too easy, too merciful. I was going to make her regret every single choice that led her here. I was going to take back everything and leave her with nothing. She thought she was in control, she thought she had one. But she had no idea. The game had only just begun. She thought she had me fooled. She thought she was untouchable, slipping between her two lies with the confidence of a woman who believed consequences were only for other people. But what she didn't know, what she could never even begin to suspect, was that I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I wasn't the fool she had mistaken me for. No, I was calm, calculating, and in complete control, because now I had everything I needed, every lie, every deceit, every proof of betrayal laid out before me like a puzzle, just waiting to be completed. But this wasn't just about catching her, it wasn't just about exposing her, it was about taking everything she thought was safe and turning it against her, about making her watch as the perfect little world she had built with her lies crumbled into dust right before her eyes. And the best part, the truly poetic part, was that she had already given me the perfect weapon against her. She just didn't realize it yet. The inheritance, the money, the one thing she had been waiting for, planning for, scheming for. She had been so certain it would come to her, so confident that she would walk away from me with everything she wanted. But I was going to make sure that the very thing she had staked her betrayal on became the reason she lost it all. It started with a conversation one I had carefully crafted, slipping it into our morning coffee routine like it was nothing at all. I told her about an old friend, someone who had recently passed, unexpectedly leaving behind a financial disaster for his family. I watched her as I spoke, saw the way her eyes lit up just a little too much when I mentioned how important it was to have everything legally secured, and then I planted the seed. I told I had been thinking about making changes to my estate planning, making sure she was fully protected, making sure she would never have to worry if anything ever happened to me. I let her believe she was winning, that she was one step closer to the life she wanted, a life where I no longer existed, and she walked away rich. She played her part perfectly, feigning concern. "Oh no, darling, don't talk like that. Nothing is going to happen to you. You'll live forever." But underneath it, I could see it, the anticipation, the greed. She thought she was manipulating me, nudging me towards her end goal, but she didn't realize I had already set the trap. Over the next few weeks, I made sure everything was in place, every legal document, every financial transfer, every asset carefully restructured in a way that left her with nothing. I met with my lawyer behind her back, rewrote my will, moved investments, changed beneficiaries, everything with a precision so clean she would never see it coming. And the best part, the absolute beauty of it, was that I made sure she thought it was her idea. Every suggestion, every hint that I should put things in her name, should secure her future, was something she believed she had pushed me towards, but in reality, I was leading her down the path she had chosen for herself, straight into the abyss. But that wasn't enough. Taking away her future wasn't enough. She needed to feel it in real time, to watch everything slip through her fingers, to experience the slow, suffocating realization that she hadn't just lost, she had been outplayed from the start. So I set the stage for the final act, a perfectly timed, perfectly executed series of events that would leave her with nothing. It started with the inheritance, the one she thought she was waiting for. I told her I had finally finalized everything, that I had made sure she was the primary beneficiary. She played her role well, pretending to be disinterested, pretending it didn't matter all, while already counting the money in her head. And then I told her I had one last step to take, that I needed her to come with me to finalize some paperwork, just a few signatures to make it official. She didn't hesitate. She never hesitated when she thought she was winning. She had no idea she was signing herself into nothingness. Then came the second phase, the exposure, not just to me, but to everyone she had built her life around, her friends, her family, her colleagues, her lover. I made sure they all saw the truth, every message, every picture, every secret she had so carefully hidden from the world. I didn't do it in anger. I didn't do it in a fit of rage. No, I did it with the same quiet precision I had planned everything else, making sure that every person who mattered knew exactly who she was, making sure that when she fell, there was no one left to catch her. And then finally, the last step, the moment she would realize it was over, when she would see the full extent of what she had done, when she would reach for the future she thought she had secured, only to find out it was never hers to begin with. The night before everything was set to go off, I held her close, whispered to her how lucky I was to have her, how much I trusted her, how I couldn't wait to spend forever with her. She smiled, kissed me back, told me she loved me the same way she had said it 1,000 times before, but this time, I knew what those words were worth. Nothing. Because by the time the sun rose the next day, by the time the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place, she wouldn't have a future left to look forward to. And the best part, the part that would haunt her for the rest of her life, was that she had done it all to herself. She had no idea what was coming. She still looked at me with that same smug satisfaction, that quiet confidence of someone who believed they were in control, who thought they had played the perfect hand without realizing they had been holding a losing deck from the start. I had spent weeks setting the stage, carefully, meticulously ensuring that when the moment came, she wouldn't just be caught, she would be completely exposed, unable to escape, unable to talk her way out, unable to spin the narrative in her favor. This wasn't just about revealing the truth, it was about making sure she felt it deep, raw, and undeniable, the way betrayal should feel. I chose the perfect setting, the same place where we had once celebrated our anniversary, a place filled with memories that she had poisoned, a high-end restaurant, private room, elegant, sophisticated, the kind of place where appearances mattered, where people whispered rather than shouted, where social reputation was currency. I wanted her to be comfortable, to feel like she was still safe, still in control. Before I pulled the rug out from under her and watched her crash, she walked in with that confident stride, dressed in an outfit she had probably chosen carefully, thinking it would charm me, soften me, make me easier to manipulate. She had always been good at that, reading people, knowing which version of herself to present to get what she wanted. Too bad for her, she had never learned to read me properly, because if she had, she would have noticed the quiet amusement behind my eyes, the kind that only comes when you know something the other person doesn't, when you were standing on solid ground and they are about to step into quicksand. She smiled, kissed my cheek as she sat across from me, ordered her usual wine, completely unaware of the game being played around her. I played along, poured her a glass, kept the conversation light, easy, watched as she leaned back into the illusion of security. And then I began. I wanted tonight to be special, I said, swirling the wine in my glass, watching her carefully. We've been through so much together, and I just feel like we should celebrate everything we've built, everything we have. She nodded, smiling her fake soft, adoring smile. Of course, darling, you always know how to make things special. I leaned in, slightly lowering my voice just enough to make her focus. But before we toast, I have something for you, something to show you how much I appreciate you. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a sleek black folder, placed it gently on the table, sliding it toward her. She hesitated just for a second before picking it up, flipping it open, her eyes skimming the first page, then the second, then the third, and then her smile faded. Her grip on the paper tightening just slightly, her breath catching in her throat. Because staring back at her were months of lies, months of deception, bank statements, hotel reservations, messages, pictures, her entire affair laid out in crisp printed detail, undeniable, cold, unforgiving. She looked up at me, then back down, flipping the pages faster now, as if she could somehow change what was in front of her, as if she could will the truth away. But it was all there, every sneaky text, every little excuse, every fake business trip, neatly compiled, gift-wrapped, and delivered directly to her in front of an audience she hadn't even noticed yet. Because just beyond the door, sitting in quiet anticipation, were the people she had spent years cultivating, friendships, family, even her lover, the man she had risked everything for, had all been invited personally by me, each of them receiving just enough of a hint to know that something big was coming, something that required their presence and patience until the right moment. And that moment was now. I took a slow sip of my wine, watching as the panic settled in the way her fingers twitched, like she wanted to grab her phone to check, to call, to confirm, but there was nothing left to confirm. She looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed low and amused, tilting my head as I studied her. It's exactly what it looks like, Olivia. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, to spin some last desperate web, but before she could, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and sent a single message. The door behind her opened smoothly, and in walked her audience, her parents first, then her friends, then finally the man she had been sneaking around with. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched, her carefully constructed world collapsing in real time right in front of her, and for the first time in all of this she was speechless. I let the silence stretch, watched as her lover realized where he was, what was happening, his eyes darting between me and her before settling on the documents in front of her, and then on the last set I had just slid onto the table, the financials, the legal transfers, the final blow. She had signed away everything without even realizing it, believing she was securing her future, while I had been erasing her from mine. You wanted a fresh start, I said, finally leaning back in my chair. So I gave you one. She turned to me, then to her lover, then to her parents, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape the weight of what was happening. Her mother's face was twisted in disgust, her father shaking his head, her friends whispering in shock, and her lover, well, he was already standing, already backing away, because men like him, they never sign up for the fallout. They just want the thrill, the chase, the stolen moments, not the public execution. She opened her mouth, closed it again for the first time, truly grasping that she had lost. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, smoothed my cuffs. Happy anniversary, I said softly, then turned and walked out, leaving her to deal with the wreckage of her own making. She just sat there, frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide, darting from person to person, looking for something, a lifeline, an escape, a single shred of control, but there was none, because for the first time in her life she wasn't the one pulling the strings, she was the one dangling at the end of them, and the realization was hitting her in waves, one after another, crashing down with no mercy. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned to her parents, to her friends, to anyone who might still be on her side. But their faces told her everything. They weren't hey, couldn't be, not after seeing everything laid out in black and white. No room for excuses, no room for manipulation. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating, until finally she tried to speak, her voice breaking before the words could fully form. I can explain. I tilted my head slowly, watching her, the way her breath came uneven, the way her fingers curled around the folder, as if she could somehow crush the evidence inside and make it disappear. Explain. I repeated the words, slow, deliberate, almost amused. Please, Olivia, I would love to hear the explanation for this. I gestured to the pages in front of her, the messages, the photos, the receipts, the undeniable trail of betrayal. Go ahead, take your time, we're all listening. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out, because there was no explanation, nothing she could say that wouldn't make her look even worse, nothing that could rewrite the truth that had already been carved into stone. Her lover shifted uncomfortably next to her, jaw tight, hands clenched, like he had only just realized he wasn't walking out of this unscathed either. I could see it, the way his eyes flicked toward the exit, like he was calculating the fastest way out, like he was already deciding whether or not she was worth the fallout. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. Her mother was the first to speak, her voice sharp, cutting through the suffocating tension. Olivia, what is this? And just like that, the floodgates opened. Her father, shaking his head, disappointment etched into every line of his face. Her friends whispering, her lover already stepping back, distancing himself, as if that would somehow shield him from the damage. And then she panicked. It started small, her breathing shallow, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table, but then the reality sank in, really sank in, and suddenly, she wasn't calm anymore. Suddenly, she wasn't in control. She reached for me instinctively out of habit, like I was still the man who would protect her from this, from herself. Please, we can talk about this, just us, please don't do this. I smiled, a slow, measured thing as I leaned back, crossing my arms. Don't do what, Olivia, show them who you really are, because that's not me doing anything, that's just you being you. She shook her head, fast, frantic, her carefully crafted persona cracking at the seams. It's not like that, it wasn't serious, it was a mistake, a stupid mistake. I never meant to hurt you, I never meant for it to go this far. I nodded as if I was actually considering her words. A mistake, I repeated, tapping a finger against my chin before flipping through the pages in front of me. You know, Olivia, I've made mistakes too, like trusting you or thinking you were someone worth building a life with, but unlike yours, mine didn't last for months. Mine didn't involve hotel rooms and secret messages and making plans for a future without me. Her lips parted, her breath hitching, and then she tried again, her voice smaller, now weaker. I was confused, I didn't know what I wanted, but I always loved you, I still love you. I laughed low, quiet, unimpressed. Love? I repeated like the word was foreign, like it was something I had never heard before. You don't love me, Olivia, you love what I gave you, the security, the stability, the life you got to enjoy, while sneaking around behind my back. You love that I never questioned, you never suspected that I made it easy for you to lie, but now that's gone, isn't it? Now there's nothing left for you to hold on to. Her eyes burned, now desperation creeping in, because she knew she was losing, knew there was nothing she could say that would change what was happening. So she tried one last time, reaching for the only thing she had left, her voice shaking. We can fix this, please, we can fix this, just tell me what you want me to do. I leaned forward, just slightly, locking my eyes onto hers, letting her see the final nail being hammered into the coffin. What do I want you to do, Olivia? I mused like I was really thinking about it. I want you to sit there and feel exactly what I felt. I want you to understand that this moment right here is the moment you lost everything, not because of me, not because of bad luck or a misunderstanding, but because of your own choices, because of your own arrogance. I gestured around the room to the people still watching, to her parents, her friends, her lover, who was now fully retreating toward the door. I want you to remember their faces, Olivia. I want you to remember the way they're looking at you right now, because this is who you are to them now. This is who you always were. Tears slipped down her face, now silent, hopeless, but I didn't care. She could cry, she could beg, she could scream, none of it mattered, because she had already lost everything. There was no coming back from this, no fixing, no second chances. I stood up, straightened my jacket, adjusted my cuffs, turned toward the door, then paused just for a second, looking back at her one last time. Goodbye, Olivia. And then I walked away, leaving her drowning in the ruins of her own betrayal. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart for her. Once the truth was out there, it spread like wildfire, faster than she could contain it, faster than she could spin it into something salvageable, because that's what she had always done, spun the truth, bent reality to fit her own narrative. But this time there was no version of the story where she came out clean, where she could twist herself into the victim, where she could play the role of the misunderstood wife who had simply made a mistake. No, this time the truth was undeniable, written in black and white, seen by too many, heard by too many, and when the dust settled, she was left standing in the wreckage alone. Her parents disowned her. They weren't just disappointed, they were disgusted, humiliated, ashamed. They had raised her better, or at least they thought they had. Her father cut her off completely. No more financial support, no more trust fund, no more bailing her out of situations she had created for herself. Her mother tried at first, tried to soften the blow, tried to convince her father to give her a chance, but even she couldn't ignore the weight of the evidence, the sheer level of deception. And when the whispers started within their social circles, when their friends started looking at them with pity and embarrassment, even her mother let go. And that was the end of that. Her friends, what little she had left, didn't stay either. Some of them were at the dinner that night, saw firsthand the destruction, watched her crumble in real time. And those who weren't there heard about it soon enough, because people love a scandal, especially one as juicy as this. No one wanted to be associated with her. No one wanted to be the person defending her choices. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a woman who had planned to take everything from a man who had given her everything, and no one respects that, no one pities that. She became a pariah overnight, ignored, avoided her calls, left unanswered her messages, seen but never responded to. Her job was the next to go. She had always flaunted her career as if it were something she had built with her own two hands, but the reality was it was a house of cards propped up by connections, by the reputation she carried as my wife, and without the stability of my name behind hers, people started to look at her differently. Colleagues whispered behind her back, clients began to pull away, and then the final blow came when her company decided they couldn't afford the scandal, couldn't afford the bad press. She wasn't fired outright. No, they were smarter than that. They simply made it impossible for her to stay, pushed her toward the doors so she could leave on her own terms. But it didn't matter. The result was the same. One moment she had a career, the next she had nothing. As for her lover, well, he disappeared faster than anyone. He hadn't even stayed for the full fallout. The moment he realized that he was just as exposed, just as tangled in the disaster, he ran, blocked her number, erased their messages, acted as if he had never even known her, because men like him never stick around for the consequences. They take what they can while it's easy, while it's exciting, and the moment things get difficult, they vanish, leaving behind nothing but regrets and unanswered calls. She tried, of course, she tried to salvage what she could, tried to reach out, tried to apologize, tried to manipulate her way back, and she called me once, twice, then a dozen times, each time her messages becoming more desperate. First it was denial, then it was bargaining, then it was pleading, promises that she would fix it, that she would do anything, that she still loved me, that she had made a mistake. But I never responded, never acknowledged her words, because I wasn't interested in closure. I wasn't interested in explanations. I had already won. There was nothing left for me to say. I moved on seamlessly, effortlessly, without a single misstep, because I had planned for everything, ensured that I came out of this untouched, while she drowned in the consequences of her own choices. My accounts were intact, my reputation untarnished. I kept the house, the cars, the investments, everything that had once been ours was now mine, and hers, well, she had nothing. The last I heard, she had moved out of the city, couldn't stand the stares, the whispers, the way people looked at her with either pity or disgust. She had burned every bridge, lost every connection, and now she was just another name, another cautionary tale, another woman who thought she was smarter than the man she betrayed, and learned too late that she was not. I never looked back, never regretted a single decision, because I had done exactly what I set out to do. I had taken her game and played it better. I had taken everything she valued and left her with nothing, and in the end that was the real victory. Not just that she lost, but that she lost to me. Life has a way of balancing itself out. People think they can do whatever they want, that they can lie, cheat, manipulate without ever facing the consequences, but reality always catches up. Eventually the truth always finds a way to surface, and when it does, it's never kind, it's never forgiving. Olivia learned that the hard way. She thought she could play both sides, keep her comfortable life with me while indulging in her secret fantasy with him. She thought she was smart, careful, untouchable, but in the end she was nothing more than another person who mistook kindness for weakness, who believed trust was the same as blindness, who assumed she would never get caught because she had convinced herself that she was always in control. But she was wrong. She was wrong about me, about everything, because I wasn't a fool, I wasn't blind, I wasn't weak. And when the time came, when I had all the proof, all the power, I didn't just walk away. I made sure she felt it, every single consequence, every single ripple of her actions. I made sure she understood that betrayal isn't just a mistake, it's a choice, and choices have repercussions. Choices rewrite the future. Choices determine who walks away whole and who is left picking up the pieces alone. So here we are. She lost everything, and I lost nothing. If anything, I came out of this stronger, smarter, with a life completely free of deception, free of someone who never truly valued what she had. I moved on with ease, no regrets, no second thoughts, no hesitation. She was a chapter that ended exactly as it should, with justice, with balance, with the absolute certainty that she would never be able to do to someone else what she tried to do to me. And maybe some people would say I went too far. Maybe they'd say I should have just left, let karma do the work, let her ruin herself on her own. But I don't believe in waiting for justice. I don't believe in letting people escape the consequences of their choices. I believe in making sure they understand and making sure they never forget. And Olivia will never forget. She will never forget what she lost. She will never forget the moment she realized she wasn't the one in control. She will never forget the way everyone she cared about turned their backs, the way her carefully constructed world collapsed in a single night. She will never forget that she played a game she wasn't equipped to win. So now I have a question for you, for anyone watching, for anyone who has ever been in my position, who has ever been lied to, betrayed, made to feel like they were nothing more than an obstacle in someone else's story. If you were me, if you had seen what I saw, if you had been in that restaurant sitting across from the person who had spent months plotting against you, smiling in your face while stabbing you in the back, if you had all the proof, all the power, if you had the chance to make sure they never walked away unscathed, what would you have done? Would you have just left, walked away, let them think they got away with it? Or would you have done what I did? Would you have played the game better? Would you have made sure that they lost everything the way they tried to take everything from you? Would you have let justice be decided by chance? Or would you have made sure it was delivered directly into their hands? Think about it carefully, because people love to say they would be the bigger person. until the knife is in their back, until the truth is staring them in the face, until they realize that sometimes being the bigger person just means making sure the person who betrayed you finally understands what it feels like to be powerless. So tell me, what would you have done in my place?